Hey everyone, this is Matt. Welcome back to the channel. And today it is an absolutely beautiful day. It's supposed to be like in the mid 70s. It is super windy though, so I won't be doing a whole lot of filming outside. The birds are out, the helicopters are out, the wasps are out. It's gonna be a fantastic day to make a video. And I'm totally being sarcastic about that. But we do have a few little things that we need to take care of on the RX-7 to get the interior buttoned up, which I did take a break from the interior for a little bit, mostly to kind of work on a few other things, but I'll show you real quick what we've got to do today. But I think we should be productive, and hopefully after today there really won't be anything outstanding left to do on the car. So obviously I have the last of the door cards still to do. They're really ready to go. I just need to get the speakers hooked up, which is what we're going to work on today. And then obviously I've got the giant hole still in the dash where the head unit needs to go, so we're going to take care of that as well. And of course everything's the same on the passenger side. I've got everything set up in my shop, just laid out in there because we got to do some wiring, and it'd be easier to do it in my shop than it will be out here. Once we've done that, we can get the speakers mounted, and then hopefully the door cards put on, and then we could snap in the head unit. So it's really not a lot to do, but there is a lot that could go wrong between now and getting all that installed. So let's head over to the workshop and I'll show you what we got. When I got my RX-7, the first thing I realized is that the head unit was just kind of flopping around inside the dash. And so it was one of the first things I'd planned to do with the car, was to get this mounted and redo things. But then once I did start trying to use this, I realized all the speakers in the car were blown and various other things. Sometimes it would come on, sometimes it wouldn't. So I knew there was some other issues, and so I kind of put it on the back burner. But I did go ahead and pick up all the things that I was going to need to do the project. And primarily I got a replacement head unit just because this one does have Bluetooth, but really it didn't have some of the other features I was looking for. So I picked up a Pioneer 1400NEX, and this has been sitting on my shelf forever. This again was one of the first things I purchased, was this mounting kit, because I wanted to get that secured instead of having it flop around inside the dash where it could cause some damage and or electrical problems. The factory speakers are kind of interesting. They do come in these specific mounting bracket thingies, and I will say that they probably are not, like, you could probably pop these speakers off. I think they're also glued in aside from being screwed in, and I have played with them a little bit to see if I could pop them out. Like, I don't know if you could see there's some adhesive down under there, but so you certainly could just pop these off. I think maybe you may have a hard time getting a bolt pattern, a screw pattern on a aftermarket speaker that would work. But I just opted to not even fool with these. I was able to look online and get a very, very cheap set of these PVC brackets. They're not perfect. They do have some issues, and I'll put a link into the description where I got these. I can't remember if I paid $100 or $40 or something like that for the pair. These will allow you to go up to a 6.5 inch speaker. So over there you can probably see it. I've got a couple of 6.5 inch kicker KS speakers that kind of match the 6x9s I put in the back. So it'll be pretty straightforward on the install. I'm really just gonna take these aftermarket speakers and put them in these brackets. I'll go ahead and take the connector off the factory speaker and reuse that so that I can have a plug and play kind of fit. They're just kind of segmented and they're open in between. So I took some sound deadening material and pressed it in between each of the PVC pieces. And then once these are in the car, I do think there's gonna be some areas where there's gonna be some gaps between this bracket and the door panel. So what I'll have to do is probably go in a few places and add some sound deadening. So where the RX-7 has the wiring harness kind of come up through the door, I believe that's kind of the why this section's kind of built out, is to allow that wiring harness to come through. The OEM brackets actually have a marker that says right hand or left hand side. So this will be my right hand side. This part of the connector, it appears to be the same, but it's probably the mirror image. So this one I will write a little R, mark an L. So now we know right and left side. And then I'm just gonna try to cut these back as far as I can. So that one's there. So This will be my matching right-hand side new bracket, so I'll just put that there. So what I need to do is go ahead and figure out the polarity. Basically have a blue wire and a gray wire on each connector. On a new speaker, it's always going to be fairly obvious. There's either going to be a red dot, a plus symbol, minus symbol, or you can tell because of the size of the connection points. So the positive will be a little bit wider and the negative will be a little bit narrower. So I can at least narrow that much down without having to do too much work. So without having to pull the factory wiring diagrams out, I will look at the back of these speakers to see if they have any of the same information. And what I can tell is that I don't see a plus or minus, at least from the orientation that I can see. But what I can tell is that the blue wires are going to the wider connector, so those must be the positive, and then the gray wires are going into the narrow. That really should be a no-brainer, but again, you can just look down in there and see how it was wired there. So I'll put the blue with the positive and the gray with the negative. So you get the idea. I will go ahead and do the other side, but I'll put some heat on the shrink wrap once I get both sides done. But definitely remember to put your shrink wrap on before you do this. Really from there, we can go ahead and mount them into the brackets. On the bracket, I've gone ahead and marked the screw hole pattern that I need to use for my speakers. So I just lined it up until they all matched. I am gonna go ahead and take my speaker gasket tape, and I'm just gonna run it around the inside of the edge as best I can, and go all the way around. The head unit that came out of my car was a Pioneer, and my new one is a Pioneer as well. So the wiring harness is actually very, very similar. Of course, my new unit has a lot more connectors and options to connect various things like backup cameras and things like that than the one that came in the car. However, I am just going to go ahead and replace the connector anyway. I will reuse the adapter harnesses that connect into the body wiring harnesses, just because that's be the easiest thing to do. For the most part, this is a standard process where you just kind of match the color of the wires from the back of the head unit to the adapters. And of course, this adapter actually labels, right front speaker negative. So, that helps as well. And I can cross-reference that with the installation manual. My new one has a few things, like I said, like reverse signal for the backup camera, things like that that we're not going to have right now. And it has this parking brake line. I'm not sure if there's going to be reduced functionality if this is not triggered. Obviously the manufacturer's trying to make these safe so that people aren't using them while they're driving, so they want to see the parking brake switched, but we may just defeat that. If I need to do some more studying on that, but for the most part, I just need to swap these two connectors over to these, going color by color. And for me, I will go ahead and disassemble this, and then I'll just solder and heat shrink and all that good stuff this new one back together. I was actually getting ready to install this in the car, and I reread the owner's manual or the installation manual for my head unit, and when I went back and looked at the wiring diagram for the parking brake switch, it actually is looking for a positive signal. It's not looking for a ground. So originally I had wired this up, just grounded it off, and then I've got a pigtail here that I can connect into the car. So I've got all my grounds connected there. I think there is a way that you can put the head unit into like a demo mode, and it just kind of bypasses this whole situation altogether. But it's probably one of those things that once you've done that, it probably, you know, the head unit itself probably has some different features that work that maybe shouldn't work when you're doing that. And, you know, if you ever lost power to the car, you may have to redo that every time. Obviously, the intent is for you to hook this up to your parking brake so that certain functions do not work unless the car is in park. So obviously that's the recommendation from Pioneer. I didn't want to have to go through that hassle of connecting this to the e-brake, and you know, using things like Bluetooth for making calls is kind of the reason why I got this head unit. And I'm not sure if it would have limited functionality to be able to do that while the car was driving. So the easiest thing for me was just to go ahead and pick up a bypass, and this one's made specific for Pioneer, and it's actually really cheap, and I'll put a link in the description for it. Basically what this will do is it'll take power off of the accessory and then ground, and then it'll connect into the parking brake line. And that'll basically trick this into thinking that it's basically always in park. I think this is like $8 or $9, maybe $7. You can get these pretty quick and cheap. Not that there's any real rhyme or reason to do it, but I will just go ahead and use these quick connectors on this guy, just in case I do have any trouble. You know, I'll be able to disconnect it and troubleshoot before soldering it all together permanently. But I already had some of these connectors anyway, and I'm not going to hook up an amp in the car, so I'm just going to use this remote line just directly into this. If I had an amp or something I was trying to turn on, then I would have, you know, I'd split that signal so that I can have both of those plugged in at the same time. So I'll just crimp these on, heat shrink them down, plug it all in, and then this will be ready to go back in the car. And then I need to get the bracket and the cage that holds on the head unit assembled, and then we're almost done. So now I think the wiring harness is complete. We have the two connectors that go into the body, my pigtail for the ground, and then I've just kind of zip tied and taped everything together, and then that's the plug will go back into the head unit. And I will mention that I'm not using electrical tape. I am using a high temperature wiring harness tape. This will be directly over top the transmission tunnel, right in the dash, where there's a potential, even though we insulate it, there's still potential for some heat to get inside there. So, you know, after I secured everything with shrink wrap, I went ahead and just taped up the wires to help, you know, manage them a little bit better. So we'll have to kind of figure out where all this is going to set once it's in the dash, because it is a fairly beefy bundle, but you don't want to like crimp all this together because then it will get really stiff. So you kind of want to leave it loose so that when, you know, you have some room to push that back in there. So I'll set that out of the way. And then the next thing we need to deal with is the cage for the head unit. This is the part number, and again, if I can find this on Amazon or someplace like that, I'll put a link to it in the description so that, you know, if you need to pick this up. This is kind of a universal kit for double din head units. So you get your beauty trim ring that goes in there, and actually, you know, the nice thing about this is that like it fits perfectly within the FD's little console. So this is actually really trick because you don't have to do a whole lot of modifications. So you get the side brackets, the cage that goes into the dash, this little bottom piece, and then you get some extra hardware and some bits and pieces. This is just going to kind of pinch onto the trim, and you know, as we all know, these 90s plastic is not super strong. So I need to get this in the car and then figure out if this is actually going to hit the, there is a little nub in the back of the dash that this could potentially hit. You have the hardware so that you could put this kind of rubber nub on the back of this, and then potentially that hits right on the spot that it needs to. So I need to sort all that out, and I'll do that here in a second. But while we're in here, we can go ahead and get the the side brackets onto the side of the head unit. The head unit comes with a couple different packs of screws, and for the installation we're going to do, we need the ones that kind of sit flush. And basically, I want to set these on here, and you can see there's just a bunch of holes, and they kind of correspond to the different holes on the side of the head unit. I basically want to set this so that when the trim ring is on, that it's basically flush with the touch screen. So just eyeballing it, I kind of can see that my options are going to be kind of right there. That looks like I'm going to run out of real estate if I go anywhere else. So that's basically going to be the only option, and there's 2 places for screws there. And now for just a quick test fit, I want to make sure that those screws are going to clear the cage. And it looks like it's a little bit snug, but I mean, I think that's as good as it's going to need to be. And of course, the trim ring just kind of snaps on with these little plastic clips. Really close to flush, and actually I can see that mine's a little bit higher here than it is here, so I might loosen these screws and try to set that a little bit more flush, because this side's fairly flush. This side does stick out just a little bit, so I'll try to loosen these up and see if I can adjust that. But anyway, I think now we can go out to the car and figure out about getting this cage installed, and then exactly how this bottom piece is going to go in. You know, that'll help support the weight of this head unit. The quarantine hairdo is getting real. I really appreciate you guys for watching. I know this has literally almost been a year-long process, and it's not made, I haven't made huge progress, but when you're doing it all yourself and tracking down parts, it takes some time. I really do want to speed things up. I really want to do better on this channel. I really want to connect with you guys a whole lot more than I have been. So I've been thinking about doing a Q&A or a live stream or something. If you guys have any questions about anything about the car, me, life, you want to just someone to talk to while you're stuck at home during quarantine, just let me know. And you know, down in the description, let me know what like a good day would be for most of you guys. And I know it'll be impossible to pick a day that'll be even remotely catch everyone. But if there seems to be a common day that's best, then I'll try to shoot for that and let you guys know, and I'll set that up and maybe do like a 30-minute, hour-long stream or something for you guys. Really appreciate your guys' support. Links for everything that I've used here today will be down below so that you can check that out. And again, any questions, comments, please leave them down below. If you have any requests on anything, let me know, and I'm going to see you guys in the next one.